Hello, everyone. We are here for one more LLAC Convida series. With this time with Professor Trevor Kahn, and I'm going to introduce him for you. And I hope you can enjoy this talk today. So Trevor Kahn holds a PhD in applied linguistics from the University of California at Los Angeles. He has been an U.S. Embassy English Fellow in the Department of Modern Languages at FFLS USP. He has taught in several contexts, such as high school, as an English and Spanish teacher, a private tutor, also has taught in Korea, has been a professor of English as a second language in community colleges, and he is also a lecturer at the University of California, Los Angeles. So now I will pass the floor to Kahn, Trevor Kahn, and I really would like to thank him for finding time in his hectic calendar to provide us with some insights about EMI. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Marilia. I'm very happy to be here with you all today and to just talk about some EMI. I guess I will go ahead and start sharing my slides and we can get underway. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with English as a medium of instruction. And so some of this might be review, some of this might be brand new. And so we'll just, talk about it. And then when there's a little bit of time at the end, we will have some questions. So here's my title slide. I start with this title slide because I'm supposed to, but I find this title slide very boring. So I have more interesting title slides usually, like this one, where I have a bunch of animals sitting around. Why do I have a bunch of animals sitting around this building? Oh, because there's scaffolding. So I might talk a little bit about scaffolding today as we talk about EMI. I have another sample title slide here. So this one is, I put into the AI image generator, a teacher eating rolls. So we're going to talk about teacher rolls today. I apologize. That is a terrible, terrible pun, but that is one way that I like to just, do little things to get people's engagement and attention. So what we'll be talking about today is implementing English as a medium of instruction. I will talk about the implementation of EMI at USP and some other ways that it can be implemented in other places as well. So let's look at the agenda. Today we will start with just kind of some background about EMI and why we're teaching EMI. As I mentioned, I'll talk about EMI at USP. Because we've had, there was an initiative back before COVID and some EMI was instantiated and I wasn't here for that. And then just this last year, while I've been a English language fellow, I have been training some professors across the USP campuses in English as a medium of instruction. After I review that, we'll take a look at how the principles behind EMI influence the way that we're teaching and what we're actually teaching to our students. We'll talk about the use of different languages in the classroom. And if time, we might get a little bit deeper into some basic pedagogy of EMI, but I think we'll have, that'll be around the time that we wrap up. So let's start with this very ubiquitous definition. You'll see this in any paper that talks about EMI. So EMI is the use of English language to teach academic subjects other than English itself in countries or jurisdictions where the first language of the majority population is not English. Okay, we've had so many, we always have, historically and present day, we have so many different methods of teaching English, right? And sometimes the distinctions are a little bit fuzzy, sometimes they aren't clear. So isn't that just like CLIL? Well, content and language integrated learning, well, they both CLIL and EMI focus on language. However, the focus in CLIL is both the language and the content. All right. And so one of the primary distinctions with all of these different approaches is that EMI, while the majority of the instruction will be in English, you're not a language teacher. You're not teaching language skills per se. You just happen to be using English as the medium, right? Okay. Another difference is that CLIL is typically pre-university level, right? And of course, it could be any language, not just English, where English as a medium of instruction is designed around, well, English, right? Okay, so what's another one? English for specific purposes, or ESP. And in ESP classes, you know, you're focusing on the outcome of a particular English lesson. So maybe English for business, or English for you know, working a particular job. And so these are language classes that are heavily influenced by the content, but they are not strictly content classes. Okay, content-based instruction or content-based learning. Again, the primary difference is that with CBI, that language and content are simultaneously delivered, not just the content. So again, EMI focuses on teaching these academic subjects. It also is, as we'll see in this, well, I'll talk about on the next slide a little bit, it is primarily at the university level, whereas content-based instruction can be many different places. So again, the teacher role differences between the two are that in CBI, teachers are integrating, you know, language with the content, and as I'll talk about, you know, the teacher roles, the teacher eating the bread. Teacher roles differ both in terms of, you know, that the teachers of EMI are primarily delivering content, but methodologically, pedagogically, the role of the teacher in EMI is, yes, you're an expert on the content, but the pedagogy stresses that teachers should be leading a more student-centered classroom. So again, if we have time at the end, we'll talk more about student-centered classrooms, but essentially, rather than lecturing for most of the time, like a traditional classroom, the focus is on activating student autonomy in their own learning. So there is some lecturing, but there are a lot of student-led activities as well. So we started with contrasting differences from other types of English language instruction. But basically, if we focus on this, there is a focus on content, as we've stressed. There is a higher proficiency level, you know, there has to be some level of proficiency for EMI, whereas a lot of these other English as a second or English as a foreign language methodologies, you can teach at a very beginning level. And the other thing is that this is designed predominantly for university level instruction. And the reason for that is, and we'll get into here, but the reason for it being predominantly at the university is that as college students or graduate students, the people taking the English as a medium of instruction are finishing their work at the university or integrating with their work at the university the notion of globalization or internationalization. And so these students are looking at jobs or abroad opportunities that will be conducted predominantly in English. And that's one of the primary goals of these programs, are to open up opportunities and to for these students. Some of the other goals of why EMI tends to, what the focus of EMI is and why we're doing this, is to raise English proficiency in the country and in the workforce, to promote international exchange or internationalizing a campus. EMI is a very hot issue right now, and so it raises prestige of programs and generates money. The job market, which we talked about, finding jobs in Europe or Asia or North America, of course, and the methodologies that we incorporate into EMI are just good practices for professors and for student engagement and motivation and attitude. I also wanted to mention that, well, I'll come back to that later. I sometimes get ahead of myself. Okay. So these implementing these EMI is always going to have a lot of challenges. It is a lot of work. It costs a lot of time and money to implement a lot of these. The use of English can be intimidating for the people who are typically instantiating these classes are biology professors, engineering professors, medicine, geology. It's not people who are used to teaching English, right? And so the use of English in this sort of context, in this teaching context, is going to be new for many of the professors who are doing this. And not only are they using English in a way that they might not be familiar with, but they are teaching in a way that they might not be familiar with. One of the challenges that professors face is that they think, oh, I have this 2-hour lecture in Portuguese. It's a brilliant lecture. And so I can just translate my slides from Portuguese to English. Not for EMI. So if you're following the EMI style of a classroom, then a 2-hour lecture is not what EMI is about. EMI is about, like I said, shorter lessons and more student-centered learning approaches. So both professors and students can feel like they might not be prepared, and that is okay. That is okay. One of the things that a lot of students and professors who work with EMI face is the overcoming fears. And one of my alternative title slides involved scaffolding. And so we'll talk a bit about, you don't have to go from 100% Portuguese to 100% English with 100% methodologies of EMI, because that is so much work. It is so overwhelming. There's so much fear that would be induced by that. And so instead, baby steps, right? Scaffolding, just going a little bit at a time, incorporating more and more, because the goal of this is, as we looked at, a lot of this internationalization and international opportunities, not having students leave with perfect English, right? Of course, we want their English to improve, but that is not the primary goal. The primary goal is for content to be delivered, and for it to be delivered predominantly in English, so that students can apply what they've learned and apply the language skills that they have been working with into these international opportunities. Another challenge that I don't have a magical solution to is that it can take more time. So if you have a class that you are converting from Portuguese to English, it might be a challenge to cover the same amount of material in a non-native language. And so that's where another tenet of EMI comes into play, which is community resources, networking, where we all know, if we as teachers all know, that teaching can be, I think it's on the second point here, it can be very isolating, right? And so building community and networking, even if people aren't necessarily going to be in the classroom with you, but communicating with people in different departments on the same campus who are also interested in English as a medium of instruction, communicating with people from other campuses who are also, there are so many people across Brazil and across the world who are starting to use English as a medium of instruction. And the more resources that can be shared, the more support that can be given. There are, of course, resources on every campus for this type of thing. For instance, LLAC is a wonderful place for English language help. However, going beyond just the existing resources and finding the other people who are working in this can be very useful in covering content, not draining ourselves too much of the efforts that we're putting forth with all of this. Another thing I want to say about EMI is that EMI and the pedagogical approaches, the formalization of these methods, it provides a framework, because teaching in English in different subject matters is happening right now, whether they're using the ideas of English as a medium of instruction, the pedagogical approaches, or if they are just doing it on their own. And so there is a demand from the students who are looking at international opportunities. There is the desire for professors who see the need for communicating in English, for using content in English. And so teaching using English as the medium is happening whether or not this formalization, this framework is applied. And so providing this framework for the professors, the universities, the students who are interested in globalization and internationalization when it comes to their content areas is simplifying and building this community that we're talking about. Okay, I'll go into a little bit of background on on EMI. So, like I said, I believe it was 2019, there was some EMI that was EMI training courses for professors here at USP. And I was not part of this. This was all just, I reviewed some of the notes and an article that discussed the successes and challenges. And then I'll segue into what I've been doing over the last academic year or so. So the EMI at USP back in 2019, I believe Luciana Carvalho Fonseca was one of the people spearheading that. And the focus of the program, which was from Cambridge University in United Kingdom, the focus on that seemed to be a bit more about the use of English language of EMI. And so each weekly topic, I believe there were 8 weeks, which is similar to what we did. Each weekly topic was a different area of English language use. A lot of the materials, a lot of the language was coming from this Anglo-centric perspective. And so it was hard to incorporate some of the cultural aspects of specifically Brazil, but other international communities as well. One of the challenges they reported was that it was difficult to gauge the language skills. And so I'll talk about one thing that we did to address that. And they also came out recommending continuous support and professional development opportunities. So once the course ends, as I mentioned, it can be very isolating. You're then left to your own devices to get out there and implement these classes. And so if there was continual professional development, continual support, that would be invigorating and useful for providing resources for professors. So I'll talk about ways that we're trying to address that, although it's not perfect. So I mentioned the themes for the 2019 course were largely language-based, and these are the different modules you can look through here. So language for lectures, language for seminars, language for small groups and practical sessions, language for tutorials and supervision, language for online communication, for evaluation and feedback, for developing and extending professional roles, and finally, for fulfilling professional responsibilities. So yeah, as I mentioned, very much focused on the language. One of the differences with the EMI that actually, well, I'll talk. We've had 2 EMI courses this past semester that were predominantly online, predominantly asynchronous online, but we also incorporated some synchronous lessons as well. But we focused not only on the language, but also on the pedagogy of EMI. I think that providing, it can be a challenge to say, oh, this is the style, this is the method, the approach for how to teach this kind of student-centered classroom and this kind of active teaching methodologies. But it can also be a comfort for the professors to have a framework with which that they are delivering their language and content. The course also, it requires 8 hours or so per week, which was a lot. And much of that was for creating a syllabus, creating lessons, creating ideas for an actual class that they plan to instantiate. So this third bullet point here that says a focus on real world production, that was one of the byproducts. And after this slide, I may show you a couple of examples. Sorry, there's an alarm going off behind me. I hope it's not too loud. Okay, it's off. So rather than only using this 8-hour-a-week asynchronous online class, which was created by the Ohio State University and also with the RELO office, the Regional English Language Office and US Embassy. They worked together to develop this class. My colleague Danielle Verheijs, if some of you know him, and I instantiated a 2-hour conversation class per week, which was optional because it's hard to find a time for everyone that can make it. But on Fridays at the end of the week, we would have 2 hours of conversation class per week. And this was both to give professors an opportunity to just practice speaking, because, how often do we have just that opportunity to, if we're taking an online class, to actually sit and talk and interact. So it was nice to have, relevant conversations, relevant assignments that we would do in real time for these professors over Zoom, because, a lot of them are not in São Paulo, a lot of them are all over the country at different USP campuses. But it also addresses this need for community, for interaction. And so, we had professors from, it's back, sorry. Hopefully it's not too loud, I don't know what. And hopefully my building isn't burning down, but I think we'll be okay. We had professors from engineering and professors from arts and curation who would interact and share ideas and collaborate on some of the resources that they would use. And so it's not that if you're using EMI and you're a professor of biology, that you can only work with other professors of biology, right? You might be the only professor of biology in your department who's considering using EMI. And so finding other professors who are, you know, teaching with similar methodologies and similar language, they might have resources for you to use in class or to give to your students or something like that. I'm also going to address why the professors are doing this, and I have some examples of professors I've gotten to know and their experience with it, and I will share their experiences. Why don't we do that first, and then I'll start to show you some of the, I mentioned here that there were some of the real world production and some of these issues. I'll maybe share my screen and show you some of that and get back to the slides. So why teach EMI? So this was a professor of law, fascinating gentleman, and he's out at the campus in Ribeirão Preto. And he describes that not only was there a demand of his international, from his students for international opportunities, but in law, for instance, to share relevant present day law cases that have not been translated from English to Portuguese. It's nice to be able to look at these things that are current events, that are law cases that are not, you know, just the results of published papers that people have been thinking about and talking about. And so when he teaches in Portuguese, he has, you know, he uses cases in Portuguese. And when he teaches in English, he can use cases in Portuguese, cases in English, and you know, is confident that you know, this is not beyond the scope of what the students are hoping for and expecting. There it is again. So this professor, Fabricio, is spectacular. He's not part of USP, but he is at the Federal University of out in Tres Lagoas, and he's been training professors to use EMI for about 5-6 years now, and he has been building. One of the benefits for him is that he's been building this community of English as a medium of instruction professors and graduate students who share their resources, who network, and are in continual contact. And the community just keeps growing. For each session, he has a dozen or so students who are graduating, getting certified, and then joining this community. And then this professor, Suelia, she's spectacular. She was one of those. I mentioned that English as a medium of instruction was happening, whether you're aware of the formalization of EMI or not. And she had just kind of, in addition to all of her many research and teaching obligations, she was spending her Friday evenings offering this opportunity for many of her students. And you can see she's a professor of biomedical engineering and electrical engineering. These weekly classes where she would just teach in English and people would work in English, and it just kept getting more and more popular. And so now she's, you know, getting certified in EMI and formalizing a lot of what she was doing, and just her dedication to her students and her recognition of their desire to have a lot of this in English was incredibly inspiring and commendable. Okay, so these are just a couple of screenshots of so we have been using Canvas as the platform for delivering these classes. And that's my colleague, Danielle. Many of you may know him. And so, yeah, these are now they're going to continue. I'm an English language fellow. My time here at USP is rapidly coming to an end, sadly. My visiting professorship ends this week. So Friday is my last day officially, and so I won't be affiliated with the these open courses. However, there is another English language fellow, Scott Robertson, who will be continuing to work on this with Danielle, with Luciana, I believe, and some other folks who may be involved. And so we are always actively recruiting, and hopefully this is a program that will continue on, after I'm gone, certainly, but after Scott's gone, then we'll have people who are administering this program and instantiating EMI into different contexts. This is just, to look at what the syllabus looks at, so syllabi I know are not as common in Brazil, but they're a big focus of EMI, just to give students a nice, and it's like a 12-page syllabus, a nice view of what the course looks like, with each a course schedule providing a lot of detail, as opposed to, I think Brazil, there are often, it's a shorter program, and not a syllabus, which is more like a contract that you have between yourself as the instructor and the students. Okay, so I only have this up because I mentioned that they are creating real world final products, so kind of a task-based instruction sort of assignment. And each week there are, they have different assignments that are related to, and discussion boards and all of these things that are related to this final portfolio. And so I will, I'm going to switch from these slides to show you an example. I'll just do it briefly. I know I don't want to spend too much time on this. Here we go. Oh, that's the wrong. There we go. Okay. So I hope you can see this. I won't, like I said, I won't spend too much time on all of this, but we have this final portfolio. It is 18 pages, which, some of it is just answers to questions that they can share with their students, but a lot of it is, so here is the start of the syllabus, and they have a nice long course description. They have learning objectives. They have the content of what will be covered. There's a course calendar for all of the weeks, specific policies, all of the assignments. And so this class is ready to go. All of the materials, English language materials, some Portuguese materials. There are specific readings for each class. There are specific topics for each class. And so, so many of these classes are just for practicing English and for, getting comfortable with it. But this is, for the students, for the professors who took this seriously, now they have specific lesson plans as well, where they have, how many minutes are they spending on different activities and lectures and all of that, and how are they assessing their students. Okay, they have rubrics, which always are a comfort to the students, so they know exactly what to look for, what to expect. Okay, so student tip sheet, and it also helps, close this distance between professors and students. And that's a big deal when it's for EMI. We don't want language to be too big of a barrier. We want students to feel comfortable in class so that they push themselves to use language that might be a little bit outside of their comfort zone to to deliver content in ways that they might feel comfortable in Portuguese, but then they're exploring in English. And by narrowing the distance between teacher and student, then they tend to feel more comfortable. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing that. I think you had a good idea of what's happening there. Before I go back to the slides, I'm going to show you briefly. I mentioned that one of the areas that we were addressing was making sure that all of the professors who are taking the class, as well as students who take the class, that their language is their language level is suitable for the class. And so what we ended up doing is I have an audio file that it doesn't seem to be working, but we had students either submit a video or an audio file of themselves just talking about the work that they do, just kind of a brief, 3-minute self-introduction of who they are, a little bit about their work, about their background in using English. And then they also submitted a cover letter as well, which is what you're looking at here. So having this, then we could kind of assess, the language level, the language comfort, and then we could also cater these, the assignments to meet the needs and demands of the professors, as well as the conversation classes that we have on Fridays. And well, okay, I don't need to go through that. All right, well, I will get back to the slides. That was just to give you an idea of how we're continually trying to make this a little bit stronger, a little bit better, a little bit more useful for the people who are participating. And I think I mentioned one of the one of the issues that we faced in this first iteration of the course was that it was a lot of work. Professors, students, people who are involved at the university, they're usually, well, here's the example of the portfolio. Well, I'll start here. They're usually overworked. Sorry, I get a little sidetracked sometimes. So professors, students, we have so much that we're doing that to add an extra 8 hours, 10 hours really, if you count the conversation part of the class, to add an extra 10 hours of work per week is a lot. It's a big dedication. And so going forward, so both the 2019 version and then these first versions in 2024, they have been 8-week courses that are 8 to 10 hours per week. Going forward, so the next version of the class, which I believe is starting in August, it will be 16 weeks. So each module will be spread out over 2 weeks. So the professors will have 2 weeks to complete a module, which maybe they could do in a week, and then have the next week free, or 4 hours or so per week. And so when we advertise the course, this is the list of description that we sent out to the professors, and that's at the end there. You see that Alcani, which is the international department, is offering a certificate of completing the EMI course. I mentioned that, so this is just a brief description of what I showed you before. That number one, they are sending a 3 to 5 minute video or audio file with just a little bit of their background. and then the cover letter with their experience in English language of their own learning, and if they've taught any courses or anything like that. Okay, so as I mentioned, some of the way that we addressed some of the feedback from 2019 was these 2-hour conversation classes, which also helps with community building, networking, and university support, and gets people more comfortable in English. And this too much content in too little time, we're now spreading it out to 16 weeks. Okay, and this is just a screenshot of our conversation classes on Fridays, which the attendance varied quite a bit because sometimes people aren't available. So there were 20 or so people in the class, but this is about how many people would show up per week. Okay. I'm noticing that it is just about 2:45. So I'm going to skip. I do want to just talk about one thing in particular that I think might be helpful. So I have some slides that I'm going to skip through a little bit here, and I just want to talk about the use of language in the classroom, and then I'll open it up to some questions. So I kind of mentioned that narrowing the distance between instructor and student, which I think is great for any classroom, but it's part of the pedagogical approach for EMI. And it can be intimidating when you're using a non-native language, of course. And so part of these baby steps, part of the scaffolding, is that you can use both English and Portuguese in the classroom as you're delivering content. You just want to do it intentionally. And you want to make the language your own. It's not that you need to learn Canadian English or British English or Nigerian English or whatever form of English might be the most relevant. That could be nice for certain vocabulary, but Brazilian English is a thing. Brazilian English is beautiful, and using Brazilian English to communicate in the classroom, to tackle the content, I think definitely works. And then it also opens the door for translanguaging, which I'll talk a little bit about. The fundamental idea behind translanguaging is that it is code switching, so switching from one language to another. It's code switching, but with an academic and intentional approach. So since we are not language teachers, those of us who are in the EMI classroom, we are content teachers. We're not teaching grammar. We're not teaching. We might teach some vocabulary because that's relevant for, you would be doing that in any language, or in any content course. But the use of translanguaging allows for piggybacking, taking the academic language that students know in Portuguese and applying that to English. And so one of the fundamental purposes of translanguaging, of using Portuguese in the classroom, is to use academic Portuguese that then, because we're not teaching academic English, maybe some students are comfortable in informal English, in conversation, but they might need to be able to present in English or to write a cover letter in English or something like that. Well, if they are comfortable doing those things in Portuguese, then you can use those skills from Portuguese and apply them to what they're doing in English. So these academic language skills, they must be taught. They're not intuitive, right? Again, it's just transferring these skills from one language to the other. And so by doing this, you're code switching, as I mentioned, with academic intentions. Well, I won't get too much into that. But basically, what I will end on here is just saying that these English-only policies can be very limiting in any sort of classroom. And so it's nice to, especially when the goal is content delivery, have the option to, have lessons where maybe you give them an academic article that's written in Portuguese, and then they have to report on it in English, or perhaps, watch a video in Portuguese, and then they have to, write something up about it in English, so combining these things. Or maybe they talk in small groups about a project in Portuguese, but then they have to share it with the rest of class in English, so giving them options, giving them methods to use the language and content knowledge that they already have, and apply that to what they're learning is beneficial. Okay, I'll skip all the way to the end here, just leave that up, but I think basically we should probably open it up to any questions, because that's just about 45 minutes. Oh, hi.
Hello. Thank you very much for this insightful lecture, Trevor. The experience here at USP, I think this is going to be very important, not only for us who are here and not working directly with EMI, but catching up with what is going on, but all the other professors and people, students in Brazil who are studying EMI. As you said, it's a hot topic. It has been a hot topic for a while, and there are other institutions who are also studying it or promoting actions to establish more sustainable EMI courses. So I think it's going to be material for people to see how USP made a choice and how others are taking other courses of action. Thank you very much. And do we have any questions from the YouTube audience? Because I prefer to give time for them to ask the questions. And I have some questions on my own, but I can ask them later. Okay, while the questions come up, I would like, these are clarifying questions, Trevor. Sometimes you said professors and sometimes you said students. So who was the population of this course? Just professors at the university who were willing or who were already involved with EMI?
That's correct. Yeah. So the course that is currently being offered right now is this is the first time we were trying it, and it was we had a general call to professors across all of the USP campuses to partake in this. And I think that so this course was we had a couple of non-professors who were there to observe, both for their own research and just, but they weren't submitting work and participating and getting certified. And I think I haven't been involved too much on the planning of what things look like going forward. But I think that the goal is to incorporate not only professors, but some graduate and postgraduate students who are interested in both teaching in EMI, but also teacher training, professor training in English as a medium of instruction methodologies.
That's very good. Another question. I'm waiting for the questions, guys. So please, Bia, Gabriele, if you could post some questions. Do we have questions from YouTube? Gabi. Well, the last question is about the course. It seems the syllabus was coming from Ohio University, or it was something in which you worked on to adapt, or that was, I had a doubt.
It was largely created by Ohio University a few years ago, and we adapted some of it, but it was I think the goal moving forward is to, with each iteration, adapt it a little bit more based on the feedback we get from students, or from professors. And so, so we incorporated some changes at the beginning of things we knew we wanted to change, like this conversation class on Fridays. But for the most part, it was, we just, we used their materials, and then from there, we're making adjustments going forward.
Great.
Hi, yes, we have a question. We have some questions. His first question is from Daniela. Do you believe that translanguaging could lead students to use Portuguese norms and rhetoric into English, which could be misleading?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if that's your job as the instructor of an EMI course, is to to encourage them to use a lot of the academic language skills that they have in Portuguese already. And then when you recognize that, oh, well, this is, when as professors and you are performing assessments, when you notice that, oh, well, this is perhaps a difference in norms between academic Portuguese and academic English, then you can address that head on. I mean, that's not, I know I say that the focus is not you as a language teacher, but when you notice, something that is different, that you say, okay, well, this is for the types of grants you'll be writing, or for the types of cover letters or presentations you'll be giving, or whatever the academic context is for the international opportunities for students, or the types of citations, going from the standards in Brazil to the standards perhaps in North America or Europe or something, then yeah, I think those are resources that you can address both in class or out of class, and say, here's some contrasting things.
Great. Yes, Daniela followed up with a comment/question. Sometimes I have this perception in texts written in English that some Brazilian students are actually writing in Portuguese, but translating into English. How to overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very good question for, I mean, any instructor of not just English as a medium of instruction, but any kind of language class, right? And that's just based on experience and feedback, and getting help from wonderful resources like LLAC, who can help you with your writing, and so encouraging students to find that outside of class as well. But again, the goal of EMI is content delivery, and so if students are digesting the content and able to, maybe their academic English is not perfect, but these are things that once they feel comfortable, putting their work out there and interacting with people, they will get feedback. They will learn, through experience.
Great. We have another question here. This one from Gabriele. What is the level of English professor that are expected for the EMI course, and what is the level students should have for being able to follow an EMI class?
Yeah, it's really variable. I've had so typically professors are, I would say, so a nice starting place is if you're around B2, right? I think that's a decent place to be. I've had some professors who are lower than that, and they, dedicate themselves, and they, maybe they use translanguaging a little bit more. Maybe they have certain language skills, maybe they're better with written English than they are with spoken English. And so they, skills are going to translate different ways. And I think that's applicable for the students as well. I think students, another issue that we didn't really get into today is every classroom is going to have such a range of English language abilities of the students. Some students are going to be very much at kind of a beginning intermediate level, and some students are, maybe they've been speaking English their entire lives, and so they're more comfortable. And that's something that is difficult to manage, but can also be an advantage in the classroom by, students learning from each other. And I think that it's not just the language level of the students and the professors, it's also the willingness of the professors to some professors I've found are not as effective because they're so self-conscious about the language that they're using in the classroom. They're afraid to make mistakes. And then some professors, they're fearless and they just speak. Maybe they make grammar errors, maybe they code switch a lot, but it's much more effective. It brings them closer with their students. And another thing too is that I strongly believe is that if students see the professors making errors, making language errors, let's say, then they feel more emboldened to experiment with the language themselves. If they think that, if they can keep in their mind that, yes, you are the content expert, and so everything there is to know about, electrical engineering, but maybe your English isn't perfect, that's okay. You want them to respect your level of content knowledge and feel comfortable exploring English with you, right? Not just afraid to speak up because your English is perfect as the professor.
Okay, great, thank you. And
One
we
more-
have
One more question, Gabriela, because you're
Yes.
about to.
Perfect. There is a little bit of the ending of the question missing, so I'm going to just read. Gabriel said, inspiring talk. I have two questions, so we're going to cover one of them. In the beginning of the presentation, you told about high language level requirements in EMI. Do you think translanguaging could help this requirement to become more flexible?
So the higher language starting level that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, that was more in contrast with other types of English language learning opportunities like English for specific purposes or content-based learning, where you can do that at a more you can do a lot of that with beginners. I do think, listen, I think that in an ideal world, you're going to have students who are great at English, you're going to have a professor who's great at English, you're going to have endless content and money and sources and all of that. But each situation is going to be a little bit different. And the reality is that professors are so busy that taking the time to create a class from scratch is so hard. And so what I encourage a lot of these professors to do is, have a class that they teach in Portuguese, and then maybe one class, do that in English as a first step, and get the level of engagement from the students, get the level of language from the students. And so in answer to your question about translanguaging, I think that, start with a lot of translanguaging and, slowly incorporate more and more English as you see the students respond to, that they feel comfortable with. And I think that if there is a lower language level, that maybe it's just, okay, let's look at this article, this great article in English, and talk about it in Portuguese, right? You don't have to do the entire class all in English, all from day one. I think that that's too much for the professors, too much for the students. So yeah, I hope that addresses your question.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for all the audience we had, the questions, the participation of LLAC students, the LLAC community, and I could see also some people from other universities who are studying EMI, like Federal de Santa Maria, Trevor, who were very interested in your talk. So I appreciate all the audience we had here. Just forward that this is going to be recorded. This is being recorded, so it's going to be in our YouTube LLAC channel. So if anybody didn't have a chance to watch it, the person can do it later. And thank Trevor again for this talk, despite all the last minute things he has to do in USP to travel back to the US. And I do hope you come back to Brazil for any project or something that we can do in USP, in the department, and I wish you all the best. And thank you also for the work with the tutoring sessions in LLAC that you also
participate.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Marilia. Thank you, everyone. And I do hope to be back. So let me know if you need me to come back, just let me know.
All right, we will.
All right.
Bye-bye, everybody.